Hi there, everyone, and thank you for joining us. For those who've joined us live today, or if you're watching back online, thank you. My name's Shaya. I'm one of the lawyers at the Family Law Project, and today I'm really excited to have with me finally, because this is a conversation I've been keen to organise, is Sallyanne Hartnell. Now, Sallyanne is self-described as a relationship and divorce coach, and she's the owner of Relationship Coaching, where she assists clients with just that, with separation and divorce coaching. So welcome, Sallyanne. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're in Melbourne today, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah, and I'm joining from Brisbane. And it looks like we've got people from all over. So thank you everyone for joining. And just so people watching live, just keep an eye on the chat box and the polls. And if you've got any questions throughout, just pop them in the chat box, and I'll be sure to try and ask Sallyanne if time permits. So Sallyanne, on your website, you describe your own separation as messy, complicated, and painful. You said, I felt stuck and I couldn't decide what was the best way forward. And you also mentioned feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. So can you, I guess it leads me to two questions. First of all, what is a divorce coach? And secondly, why are you a divorce coach?
I think if I go to the why first and then the what, the why is really speaks to where I was when I was first sort of deciding whether to separate from my husband, or we were deciding whether to separate, and then moving through separation, divorce, the whole process. I was really looking for somebody. I was looking for a divorce coach. I just didn't know that that's what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody who wasn't a lawyer, who wasn't a financial advisor, not a psychologist or a counsellor, someone who'd really been there ahead of me and understood where I was, could meet me at that point and really guide and support and I guess nurture a little bit me through that process. You know, not many people, if anybody, goes into a long-term relationship or a marriage expecting that it's going to end in a separation or divorce. And there's a whole process. There's a whole lot of stuff that you're loaded with that is really new. You don't understand the process. You don't know what's going on. You've got all the emotional stuff. So there's a lot to deal with. And also you're in a really emotionally activated state and trying to make decisions, really long-term decisions with really long-term implications from that space. So I guess the why is because I was looking for that support when I went through my divorce. And then once we were divorced, I moved to a different community, and Michael, my ex-husband, the father of our two kids, would be there in the community at school events, at sporting events. And for a while, some members of that community didn't actually realise we were divorced. And when they did, a few of them came to me and said, well, we're about to separate. I want one like you've got. So there was a space for that extra level of support. So that also speaks a little bit to what is a divorce coach. It's a guide, a support, a nurture, a caring. It's objective and emotional, objective, practical and emotional support when you're going through such a massive life change. So it is about guiding. I guide my clients to choose other practitioners who are aligned with what they want, how they want to move through their separation, divorce. You know, I understand a lot of the systems. I understand the emotional impact. I understand it from a parenting perspective. So it's the whole package, but without being your best friend who's maybe in your ear or emotionally invested or involved. I can be more objective. I don't offer direct financial or legal advice. That is not my level of expertise, but I have, like you guys, you know, I have practitioners that I can recommend and guide clients to, I guess, select from. But it's more about that objective, practical and emotional support. And a lot of it comes down to communication strategy, communication support with either your soon-to-be ex-partner or your other practitioners, lawyers, so on and so forth.
And so your separation, that was about 15 years ago now, wasn't it, from memory?
Yeah,
well, you should remember.
The funny thing is I don't remember. Yeah, so my kids are now 19 and 17, and they were
yes.
sort of 5 and 7. So
Yeah. And you've told me previously when we've spoke a while ago now that your separation was quite amicable.
Yeah, it was. It was really amicable. Relationship broke down for a multitude of reasons, but we also knew that we wanted to move through it as amicably as we could. We're still interconnected. Our families are interconnected. We've got lots of mutual friends, and the main thing is, we have 2 beautiful children that we brought into the world together. So we decided that we wanted to be able to stand next to one another at school, sporting events, significant moments in their lives. Although we were separating, we were divorcing, they hadn't chosen it. So to not drag them into the conflict. So it was really front of mind to keep it as amicable as we possibly could. But also, we'd never done it before. So we didn't know whether what we were talking about, how we were deciding, the decisions we were making, whether they were in fact fair and reasonable or, yeah.
One of your blogs, which by the way, I think Alicia from my office has popped your details in the chat for your website. One of your blogs talks about holidaying with your ex, which I think is remarkable. And I know a lot of the people watching this will think, well, that's so far removed from where I'm at with my ex-partner and it's never going to happen. First of all, how fantastic that you've done that. Secondly, can you assist those people whose relationship separation has not been as amicable as yours?
Yes, definitely. And a lot of it comes down to owning what is in one's own control. So really coaching and guiding and exploring what my client can control. And I'm going to speak to predominantly women because the vast majority of my clients are female. So if I use a she, her, please know that I am actually being inclusive. I just tend to speak to she, her. So yeah, to communicating clearly, wants and needs, stripping out a lot of the emotion, dealing with your ex-partner as somebody who you have an ongoing relationship with, but trying to remove all the emotion. Also I work a lot with my clients on healing their wounds. So, whether that's childhood wounding or relationship wounding, working out what they're bringing into this new form of the relationship, be it from a past experience or past relationship. What are they bringing that is activating them and then triggering their ex-partner so that the communication or the engagement interaction actually flares up? So working on those sorts of things to really just dial everything down so that my clients can step back in a new form and try and create a new relationship without all the fire. And yes, it takes, if you want it to be amicable, it definitely takes 2. And I'll often speak to the contribution that my ex-husband Michael made in making sure that happened, because it does definitely take 2 to commit to an amicable pathway. However,
it's interesting. Sorry to interrupt there, Sallyanne. It's interesting you say that, because one of the comments in the chat box is essentially, well, that's well and good, but I can only control myself.
Exactly. And so that's where I would work with a client to say, all of that's beyond your control. If your ex-partner is going to show up in a passive-aggressive way, if they're going to block communication, whatever it is, that is beyond your control. What is within your power to control? How can you dial down your reactivity? How can you communicate from a space that is calm, reasonable, and as amicable as you can make it? That is all you can do. It doesn't mean that the ongoing relationship is going to be amicable. It just means that you take back your power, you take back what is within your capacity to control, and you release yourself from I was going to swear. I'm not sure I'm
You're allowed to swear. That's fine.
You release yourself from the bullshit and the drama. But yeah, it takes 2.
I find when I speak with a guest, they usually end up swearing, and I'm not sure if that's a reflection on me, Sallyanne. But anyway, I guess it goes back to clients that we're both dealing with. These are clients who have gone through or are going through a traumatic experience, and possibly one of the most difficult experiences in their life. And you mentioned at the outset, nobody usually goes into a relationship planning to separate, and people have lost, I guess, the hopes and dreams of what they anticipated for their family unit, haven't they?
Yeah, and there's a lot of grief that comes up around that. There's grief, and there's also in some cases a sense of guilt that we couldn't make that work, I couldn't claim that, and there's a lot of conditioning and stories that we're still fed, that it should be the happy ever after. You're going to have this, the white picket fence, the dog, and the two kids, and it's all going to be happy ever after. So that when that doesn't eventuate, there is a lot of grief and loss to be moved through and processed. Again, that's something that I would work through with a client. And grief, the stages of grief are not linear, so we might bounce back and forth a little bit, but yeah, it's definitely a really big part of my work.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And I mean, it's not just the loss of that relationship, but it might be not seeing your children as much, having lost the family home, lost the finances, loss of the extended family. There's all types of grief and losses when you separate, isn't there?
Very much so. It's big, and it can often be unexpected. And because particularly if someone chooses it, if it's your choice to step out of a relationship, the grief that comes can actually be unexpected, and it does pop up down the track as well. For some clients, it's not just right. I'm done. I've dealt with the grief. It's all finished.
Yeah.
It can pop up at birthdays or significant moments, or some people find it pops up on anniversaries and things like that. So it's definitely a process. Yeah.
Actually, one of your blogs speaks about that as well. It's the Valentine's Day, the Christmas Day, whatever it is to that particular person or that particular client, can definitely trigger those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have what I call a typical client, in terms of the stage that you are seeing them? Is it before they separate, directly after, they're a year into a bit of dispute, or do you have a typical client?
I probably have two. And yes, I see women clients at all stages, at all of those stages that you just mentioned. But predominantly, they will contact me when they're in that should I stay, should I go phase. Might have been sitting in that space for a long time, but they've just got to the point where they need to make a call. Some actually manage to reconnect and rebuild a relationship. Others then choose to separate. So she would be the first one. Should I stay? Should I go? Often young children, not always, but often young children, but definitely lives intertwined. 5+ year relationship, even up to a 74-year-old who was just like, I'm done. It's not stay or go. It's like, how do I go, kind of thing. So. So that would be one typical client, and the other is either decided to separate, or just been blindsided and told that it's over, or just in the early phases of moving through separation. Probably less common for a client to reach out to me in a really high conflict situation. I think they're just sucked down into the vortex of high conflict and less likely to reach out. That client is more likely to reach out once the process, the legal process, the legal separation property is all sorted, and she can sort of pop her head up above the parapet and go, right, well, what's next? How does my life look now?
What about me?
Yeah. Who am I now? What am I? Where am I headed? What am I doing? So yeah, but predominantly the first two, should I stay or should I go, or early phases of separation and thinking, holy moly, what do I do? Where do I start? How do I take these first steps?
So in terms of our clients that we see as lawyers, and a lot of the people watching today are service providers, places like Relationships Australia who assist separated parties or clients, what can you teach our mutual clients about communicating with their ex-partner and how to communicate with service providers, lawyers, and so on? Do you have anything you can say about that?
I always start with my clients in terms of defining how they want things to look and feel, their life, themselves in the future, like 2, 5, 10 years' time. So we really define that, and then I encourage my clients to communicate from that space as if they already had that, were that person. So, do you want to be high conflict? Do you want to be angry all the time, resentful and bitter in 5 years' time? Or do you want to feel more calm and centered and standing in your own power? All right, well, if you want the second, let's start communicating from that space now. In terms of communicating with your ex-partner, I always talk about just dialing it down and stripping it right back to what am I trying to achieve with this piece of communication, whether it's a phone call, a face-to-face conversation, or an email? What is the outcome that I want from this? Do I need a yes, no, or am I just venting? And if I'm venting, perhaps it's not really in our best interests moving forward. So it's about keeping your eye on the end goal. How do you want your life, your relationship with this person, your relationship with yourself to be in 5 or 10 years' time? What type of communication style is best served, would best serve me to step more closely towards that person and that life? Easy for me to sit here and say. When I'm working with clients, oftentimes what we'll do is he might draft an email, send it to me, and I'll just strip it out. So in doing so, I demonstrate how to take out all the activating language or the emotive language and go, what are we trying to achieve here?
I've spoken to Dads in Distress, which is a support service for men, a couple of times, and they sort of give that same recommendation to the men, that they stand alongside and support in terms of particularly email communication can just get so it can be unnecessary at times, but it can also get quite heated and just lead you down a rabbit hole or in a direction you're not wanting to go.
And it just spirals down and down and down. So if you can cut it off.
I can see they're with us, actually. Hello to Dads in Distress. Hi, Phil.
In terms of my clients communicating with their other service providers, being really organised and basically using me as the sounding board before they get to the lawyer, so can strip things out and can really streamline the process. Also, again, speaking to that end game, how do you want it to be at the end? What is really important to you? What are your non-negotiables? And where are you willing to compromise? Because if you're talking about property settlement, if you're talking about childcare arrangements, there's two of you in there. There's you and your ex, and if you're very black and white and go in with no room to move, then, as you know, it can very quickly, turn high conflict.
It can be very reactive, can't it?
Yeah. So really working out what is important to you. Well, why is that important? And is that actually in support of the life that you say you want to build 5, 10 years down the track? So again, going to the end point and then coming back to, all right, well, what's your best decision? What's your best choice? What are your best options? And in terms of taking information to other practitioners, just gather it all, get clear, define your core values and as I said, what is important to you.
And in terms of parenting matters, and children, of course, should be at the forefront of our mutual clients' minds. Of course they are. You say that you have the power to set the tone of your children's experience in your family's reorganisation. That really spoke to me. You have the power to set the tone of your children's experience in your family's reorganisation. How often do you talk through those types of issues with clients in terms of parenting matters?
all the time, all the time, you know, and it goes back to what is within your power to control. No, you can't control what your ex is doing, saying, how they're parenting, but you can control how you respond to that. You can control, and that demonstrates to your children how to deal with conflict in healthy ways, how to not be hooked back into it, how to release yourself from bitterness or resentment or frustration. So you do have the power to set the tone. It's not easy, and you know, my kids will probably tell you, you know, they've seen me probably fire up or be reactive at times over the course of our family's history. That probably would have happened had their dad and I stayed together, by the way. But, you know, so I'm not saying that I'm perfect. It is a work in progress all the time to just monitor this and hold your kids at the forefront of all your decisions. Keep them out of the conflict as much as you can, because they didn't choose it. They didn't choose for you to separate and divorce. So yeah, managing what is within your power to control is really important, particularly when it comes to your kids and their experience.
One of the concerns I have as a lawyer, and I know Alicia from my office has joined this live as well, is that as lawyers, we're not trained counsellors, we're not trained coaches, and clients don't always understand the appropriate person to use for different circumstances and how we can help them best. And I'm also have concerns about other law. I mean, we only offer fixed fees for clients, so it's a little bit different. But where you have a non-collaborative law firm or law firms not with transparent billing, my concern is that clients are using their lawyer as a counsellor, as a coach, where really they should be using someone such as yourself or a mental health professional.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Absolutely. It would be like me offering legal advice. I don't do it.
Oh, don't do that. I was going to remind everyone at the end.
Yeah. And I think it is really important for clients to build their right support team. So they need someone who's experienced in family law. They need someone who's experienced in financial stuff. They need someone who is a coach or a counsellor or a mental health practitioner of some sort. Could not agree more. So build that team so that and in best case scenario, I think everybody's on the same page and communicating relatively openly with one another, so that we're all moving the client in the same direction.
I think building that team is so critical, and it's probably a nice segue into one of the questions which everybody's probably waiting for the answer to, is how does a divorce coach differ to a mental health counsellor, psychologist? So when you're talking about building your team, how does that differ?
Coaching, when I speak about coaching and counselling in a way that coaching is more future focused, and as I've spoken to throughout this webinar, we start at the end. How do you want it to be at the end? And step back to where you are now. We tend not to unpack too much of past history. Now, having said that, I do a little bit, because I work with my clients around their core relationship wounds, their childhood wounds that are impacting the way they're moving through their relationship or their divorce. So I do a little bit of unpacking, but it's like, I use an analogy around a suitcase, which I know you've mentioned before, Shaya.
Yes.
A coach will say, okay, you got your suitcase, let's go. Where are we headed? Whereas a counsellor or a psychologist or a mental health practitioner tends to ask you to open up that suitcase and pull every little thing out and look at it and turn it around and work out how it got there and what it means to you, and then gently move you forward. I'm not saying that I'm not interested in the history of how you've gotten here, because as I said, I do work with behavioural patterns and relationship wounds when I'm working with my clients, but I'm less interested in how we got there and more interested in, right, this is an issue, how are we going to heal it, how are we going to move through it, and how are we going to get you down the road. So grab that
to that next
suitcase and let's
stage.
go. Yeah, grab that suitcase, let's go.
And you talk
Does that
about
answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And you talk about things like reclaiming your identity and redefining your future, which is something that you really focus on as a divorce coach. Is that right?
Yeah, I think many clients step out of a long-term relationship, a divorce, and they're not quite sure who they are anymore. You know, the ground, it's sort of like the foundations have been shaken underneath them. And I think that can be really frightening. There's a lot of fear and hesitancy in that. But if you reclaim it and you can step forward and use it as a redefinition, there's real power in that and empowerment.
And you've given the analogy as well that I'm not sure if I heard it because you run a podcast. What's the name of your podcast for those people listening?
Reflect, Reclaim and Liberate.
Okay, thank you. I might get Alicia to drop that in, and that will test if she's still listening. I think I might have heard it there, but you gave the analogy of a divorce coach being a bit similar to a sporting coach. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, there are similarities in that my job as your coach is to upskill you. It's to teach you the things that you need to know to play the game. So when you think about a sporting coach, they're teaching all the fundamental skills. They're teaching strategy. They're teaching you how to operate it as a part of a team if it's a team sport. But they can't actually get out there and play the game for you. So with my clients, it's like, and there is a little bit of I'm going to use the word mothering, which sounds a little bit demeaning, but I don't mean it in that way. There's a bit of nurture and mothering and upskilling so that then they can take all of that into an engagement with their ex-partner, into the future relationship or the future life that they're creating for themselves. So it is quite similar in terms of training, learning, practicing, going out there, having a go at it, making a few mistakes, coming back to a next session with me and saying, well, I tried that and that blew up, or I tried that and I did that and that didn't work. Okay, what's the next strategy? How are we going to build on those skills? What do you need to know, learn, heal to take you forward?
And you say, I don't have all the answers for your life, but I believe you do. So I guess that kind of ties in with that sporting coach analogy, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's really about you know yourself better than I could ever know you. And I believe that of my clients, and it's about me being the conduit, I suppose, me asking the right questions, me guiding in the right direction for my clients to unpack some of that stuff for themselves. It's really about guiding, steering, asking questions, asking the hard questions sometimes, and really pushing back and challenging and saying, well, is that really in the best interests of your child? Is that really stepping you closer towards that future vision of your life that you have for yourself? How is that? Or how can you do that differently? Or how can you shift or change that mindset, that thought? Is that really serving you? So those kinds of questions, challenging, I guess, and just expecting that you have the answers. You do have them. We just got to find them. So coaching is less about me telling you, yes, I'm an expert. Yes, I have knowledge. I have expertise. I have wisdom that I'm happy to share with you, but I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Thank you for that. So who would not be your ideal client, or when would it not be appropriate for you to be working closely with someone?
Majority of times, if there's domestic violence, abuse involved, I believe that those clients need the deeper support. So if there's significant trauma that is unresolved, unhealed, violence, abuse, I don't think that I'm the most appropriate practitioner. There are times when I will work alongside, provided my client also has the deeper support of psychologists or other mental health practitioner.
And
that's probably the main reason. The other person who isn't really appropriate for coaching is someone who doesn't really want to shift or change. So giving lip service to wanting change, but not actually really willing to get in there and do the hard stuff.
And that's possibly a difficult conversation to have, is it?
It's not actually, because
Okay.
I screen clients, so no, it's not difficult. It might be difficult for them to hear, but it's just okay, I don't think you're quite ready at the moment. Let's stay in touch. Let's touch base in another couple of months, or perhaps try X, Y, and Z before you opt into coaching. Yeah.
So putting aside clients who are victims of domestic violence, are there other clients who perhaps need some psychological intervention first before coming to you?
Yeah, I think, as we said earlier, this is a really separation, divorce, really significant life event. There's lots to unpack. And so, yes, many of my clients have either had counselling, psychology, with psychologist, psychiatrist, mental health practitioner, or are concurrently having some counselling while they're working with me. I don't have any hesitation in saying to a client, I'm not quite right for you yet. Here's the names of a few mental health practitioners. Go find someone. When you're feeling a little stronger, better, when some of that stuff is worked through or healed, then come back and we'll be ready.
Okay, thank you. I'm just mindful of the time, Sallyanne, so I might, just so everyone who's watching is aware, we dropped in an offer. It's called a special self-love bundle. Is that right? Special self-love bundle? I like that. Which is one of the services we've offered for people watching this webinar or their clients until I think the 13th of March. But for those watching this back and for people who are live, from a practical perspective, how does it look when a client comes to you for assistance? What type of assistance can you provide from a practical perspective?
I run two separate programs, which structurally are essentially the same. It just meets my clients at different points. One is Reclaim, one is Liberate. That is a series of 6 coaching sessions conducted over Zoom. First session is a 90-minute session, and then there are 5 subsequent 60-minute sessions. And in that first session, it's 90 minutes because it's big. That's when we define the end goal. How do you want it to look and feel in 5, 10, 20 years' time? In between those sessions, I use a messaging app called Voxer. So my clients actually have unlimited Monday to Friday messaging connection with me, so that if something happens or something blows up or they just need that extra high-level support, I'm there Monday to Friday. So there's those 2 options, and there's also a one-off 90-minute session, which the Selflove bundle is an extension of that. So that would normally be just a one-off session and a week of messaging support afterwards. There's a few extras in the Selflove bundle, which, listeners, anyone listening, if they want a book, that's open till March the 3rd. So it's a series of sessions over 3-4 months, generally fortnightly sessions on Zoom, pretty much like you and I are chatting now, and then high touch support in the background between sessions, so that you can actually, my clients can actually, they can enact what we've talked about in the session. It's not just set and forget.
Is that accountability, isn't there?
Yeah, it's accountability, but it's also cheerleading. This is a really, really bloody hard thing to be moving through. And there are steps along the way where clients, they do something really good, or something really good happens. They have a really positive interaction with their ex-partner, and it's worthwhile celebrating that. So part of what I do is, much like the sporting coach on the sideline, like, cheer you on. Yeah, that's great. Okay, how can we take that and roll it out into more interactions with your ex or whatever it is?
Okay, that's great. And so the your website we provided to everyone already, and it will be on the slide at the end for those watching back as well. We've also got your email address there, so they're probably the best ways to contact you. I think you're quite active on Instagram, aren't you?
Yeah, I was just going to say they're the best ways to get direct
Uh-huh.
access to me, or follow me on Instagram. I'm always happy to have a chat in DMs on Instagram too. So if something
Is it,
pops up on my
what's your
Instagram,
Instagram handle?
at Reflect Coaching.
Reflect Coaching.
Yeah.
All right, good. I'll just so we're wrapping things up. I'll just make sure I haven't missed any questions. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Sallyanne, as we close?
I don't think so. Only that if anybody does have a question that they wanted to ask but didn't want to pop in the chat box or didn't want to ask openly, feel free to drop it in an email to me or, as I said, a DM on my Instagram account, and I'll come back to you. Because oftentimes we don't really want to share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's right. And confidentiality as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
I can see we've got people here from Canberra, Adelaide, Melbourne, Mount Gambier, Sydney, South Melbourne. So it's far-reaching. And just to confirm that Sallyanne, which I guess everyone is these days, is online. So it doesn't matter that she's based physically in Melbourne. You can assist anyone Australia-wide.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, good. I'll do my best technology attempt to put the slide up at the end here, Sallyanne. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I'd hope everyone that's attended today has learnt something. We've got a poll here. One of the last polls was, I think, something to the effect that, do you still think a divorce coach is a bit woo-woo? I can't see the results of that, but I'll let you know later.
That'd be great. I'd be interested to know.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for your time. Great to share with you. Bye.
So I've just put the slide up now for those that are still there. It took me a little bit longer than expected, so thank you for waiting, and thank you so much